Okay, this Berkshire Regional Planning Commission meeting is now in session. Thursday, January 20th, 2022. This will be a virtual meeting as allowed by Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. General law is Chapter 30, Section 20. It is, as Tom has said, this meeting is being recorded. The first item on the agenda is a roll call.
Thank you, John. Starting with Adams.
John Duval, alternate.
Okay, Alfred. Beckett.
Here. Ann Crowett.
Ann Crowett, thank you. Cheshire.
Traub, delegate.
Thank you. Clarksburg. Dalton. Egremont.
Yes.
That's Mary.
Yes, it's Mary.
Thank you. Florida. Great Barrington.
Malcolm Fick, alternate.
Hancock. Hinsdale. Lanesboro.
Barb Davis Hassan, delegate.
Thank you. Lee.
Donovan, delegate.
Lennox. Monterey. Mount Washington. New Ashford. New Marlborough. North Adams. Otis. Peru. Pittsfield. Irvin. Richmond.
Fred Schubert, alternate.
Thank you. Sandusfield. Savoy. Sheffield.
Sari Hui.
Renee Wood, alternate.
Thank you. Stockbridge.
Christine Rasmussen, alternate.
Thank you.
Nancy Soisha is here, but she's muted right at the moment. So no, she is here and she's the delegate.
Okay, thank you. Tyringham. Washington. West Stockbridge. Williamstown.
Roger Bolton, alternate.
Windsor.
Doug McNally, delegate.
Thank you. That's the roll. Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
just had, John, someone else from Savoy is joining the meeting, so.
Okay.
Wait a second.
Sure.
Could we have the identity of the person from Savoy, please? Sarah or Bill?
Sarah, we were just finishing the roll. If you could state your name, please.
She muted. Are you muted, Sarah?
Sarah Satterthwaite from Savoy.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Quite all right. That's the roll.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is approval of minutes of the November 18th, 2021 meeting. This is a roll call vote.
Sheila Irvin, move to accept.
Oh, yeah. Do we have a second?
Second. Roger Bolton.
Roger. Any discussion, omissions, questions in regards to the minutes? Hearing none, this is a roll call vote.
As one of my staff, is Kate or Marianne going to do that?
Adams, Duval,
Yes.
Beckett, Ann, Crowett, Anne from Beckett.
Hi. I abstain because I wasn't there at the last meeting.
Okay. Cheshire, Peter Traub.
Yes.
Egremont, Mary McGurr. Abstain, it's McGurn. Abstain, McGurn. I was not in attendance.
Great
Barrington, Malcolm Fick.
Abstain.
Lanesboro, Barbara
Oh.
David Hassan.
I vote aye.
Okay. Lee Buck Donovan.
Yes.
Pittsfield, Sheila Urban.
Yes.
Richmond, Fred Schubert.
Yes.
Savoy, Sarah.
Abstain.
Abstain, okay.
So it's Satterthwaite.
Okay. Sheffield, Sarah Hoy.
Sorry, Hoy. I abstain. I was not there.
Stockbridge, Nancy Shosha. Is Nancy?
I think
She
she might
muted?
be. I think she might be having connection problems.
Okay. Tyringham, Amanda Hamilton.
Abstain. I'm not in attendance.
Washington, Don.
Abstain, I was
Okay.
absent.
Okay. Williamstown, Roger Lawrence. Is he on?
Yes, he just joined.
Is he muted? I can't see if he's muted or not.
Yes, he's muted.
Abstain, sorry.
Okay. Windsor, Doug McNally.
Approve.
Did I miss anybody? I don't think
Yes, Christine Rasmussen, alternate Stockbridge. I attended the meeting.
so. Okay, got you. Roll passes.
Okay, thank you. Before we move on to the next agenda item, Tom, you have an introduction?
Yes, I just want to make folks aware that we have actually a couple of new staff, and I'd like to introduce Lydia Schulman, who's with our public health program. She's going to be working with the Berkshire Public Health Alliance. And Chris Brown, I know, was introduced at the executive committee and perhaps at the last meeting, but he's also working on housing issues for BRPC. And other staff, I think you all know Pat Mullins on staff as well.
Okay, welcome to all. Next on the agenda is comments from the public. Is there anyone who is called in that would like to bring up a topic or a question to the BRPC that is not on this evening's agenda? Okay, hearing none. Next on the agenda is delegate and alternate issues. Any delegate or alternate would like to bring up any issue for discussion with the BRPC this evening? Again, that's not on the agenda. Sounds like everyone is good. Moving along to executive committee actions. So on the page 3 and 4 of your packet is a list of executive committee actions that were taken December 2nd, 2021 and January 6th, 2022. These are for review and for any questions that you may have. Does anyone have any questions regards to those actions? Okay. Next, we have ratification of committee members. So we have one new member this evening. The changes on the SEDS committee, Michael Coakley, the business development manager, will replace Deanna, and excuse me for the last name, Ruffer, community development director as Pittsfield representative. So it's Michael Coakley. And this is, needs to be ratified by the BRPC. So this will be a roll call vote. Tom, do you have anything to add before the vote?
No, that you've got it right. Her last name is Roofer, Deanna Roofer.
Sorry. Yep. Thank you.
What, a question to the chair, what do the acronym of CEDS stand for? Is it
It's the-
economic development?
Yes, it's a comprehensive economic development strategy.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom.
He's a good, can we comment on our knowledge of the gentleman?
You certainly can.
I mean, I've met, when Michael first came to town, one of the first things he did was call me and asked me, you know, to sit with him for breakfast. And he indicated that he was calling commercial practitioners in the industry to meet and greet, and also to find out what types of properties we had available in the region. He was very gentlemanly like, very knowledgeable, and seemed to be very competent. And I think he would make a great person to replace Deanna Roofer on this particular committee.
That's good to hear. Thank you. Anyone else have any comments? Okay, so I might as well look for a motion to approve.
Motion to approve?
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
So Mary Ann, you got those two? The motion and the second?
I've got those.
All right, this is a roll call vote.
Adams, John Duvall,
Aye.
Beckett, Ann Crowett,
Aye.
Bob Ronzio.
Oh, Bob, you're there. I didn't know that you were there.
I got in.
Oh, okay. But
Okay.
Bob Ronzio votes aye.
Okay, I got you. Cheshire, Peter Traub,
Yes.
Egremont, Mary McGurr,
McGurn, yes.
Great Barrington, Malcolm Fick,
Yes.
Lanesboro, Barb Hassan, Dave Hassan,
Yes.
Lee Buck Donovan,
Yes.
Pittsfield, Schiller Irving,
Yes.
Richmond, Fred Schubert,
Yes.
Savoy, Sarah Slatterwit,
Yes.
Sheffield, Sarah Hoy,
Sorry, boy. Yes.
Stockbridge, Nancy Shoshaw, Stockbridge, I have Christine.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Tyringham, Amanda Hamilton,
Yes.
Washington, Don Gagnon,
Yes.
Williamstown, Roger Lawrence,
Yes.
Windsor, Doug McNally,
Yes.
and that's everybody.
Thank you. Item number 6 on your agenda, approval of community assessments for fiscal year 2023. By law, the Berkshire Regional Planning Commission must notify the municipalities of their assessments no later than February each year. I'd like to hand this over to our treasurer, Buck Donovan, and then Tom after that to provide an explanation. And this will require a vote of the BRPC. Buck?
You're muted, Buck.
One more time. There we go.
There you go.
Tom, what, you want to take off on this? I don't have it in front of me right now.
Well, sure. Okay. So the Finance Committee met, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago and made a recommendation that the community assessment be increased by 2.5%. The community assessment is our BRPC's discretionary funding. That it really is the only discretionary pot of money we have, all other funds being tied to grants and contracts. As John said, we need to get the assessment approved before February, and so we can get the invoices out to the towns. Actually, we've had several towns who have been asking for their invoices already. I'm glad to discuss or answer any questions if anyone should have.
Thank you, Tom. I was looking for that 2.5 number. I couldn't remember it. I knew it was something in there. Okay.
Hey, Tom, through the chair, could I ask a question? Just because I've not been through this process before. Is there a place where I can see the current assessment for the town of Lanesboro? So if I want to do a report before the Board of Selectmen in advance of the assessment, that I can provide the information?
I think that's in the packet that was sent out.
Oh, it's in the packet. Okay.
It's in the packet. Yeah.
I'll download it. Thank you.
And actually, Barb, I had a communication with your Newtown administrator today about that.
Okay,
Yes,
right.
about it.
Okay, perfect. Then I don't need to if he's going to have it probably on his agenda.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's through the whole county. It's only an increase of $2,613. Not a whole lot.
Perfect.
Recommend I make a motion to approve the 2.5% increase.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Got those, Marianne?
Was the second, Ron? Rob Bobbins?
yeah,
Yeah, Rob, yeah. Okay.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, this is a roll call vote.
Adams, John Duval,
Yes.
Beckett, Ann.
Bob Ronzio votes aye.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Ron. Peter Traub, Cheshire.
Yes.
Egremont, Mary McGurn.
Yes.
Great Barrington, Malcolm Fick.
Yes.
Lanesboro, Dave Hassan.
Yes.
Lee, Buck Donovan.
Yes.
Pittsfield, Sheila Irvin.
Yes.
Richmond, Fred Schubert.
Yes.
Savoy, Sarah Satterwhite.
Yes.
Sheffield, Sarah Hoyt. I keep saying her name wrong. Sorry.
Sorry.
After I said I said.
Can I defer to Renee? I'm sure she knows more about this than me.
Sheffield votes yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Sari.
Stockbridge, Christine.
Yes.
Terringham, Amanda Hamilton.
Yes.
Washington, Don.
Yes.
Williamstown, Roger Lawrence.
Yes.
And Windsor, Doug McNally.
Yes.
That's all.
Okay, we got through all of the administrative work this evening. Next, item number 7, Community One Stop for Growth Grant Portal. Tom.
Yes, thanks, John. What I'm going to do is go through a very quick PowerPoint presentation about this grant portal that the state has with the Executive Office of Housing and Development, and really hit the high points of these grants. And I think the takeaway that I would like you all to have is that this is a pretty important portal in terms of trying to get funds into your community to do various items. I'm not going to go into a lot of the details because we would be here much longer than I think we all want to be. So I'm going to try to share my screen. And I hope everyone can see that. Is that coming through?
Yes, it is.
Okay, good. So the Community One Stop for Growth is a single application portal that the Executive Office of Housing and Urban Development has that really combines multiple grant programs in one portal. So when you log on to this site, you can access many grants. And what they like to call it is through the development continuum. So these grants are from planning to site assessment and improvement, and also construction monies. The benefits of this program are that you can be considered a community or an applicant who has an idea about trying to do something, could be considered for more than one grant program. You start to form partnerships with state agencies, and then there can be some direct referrals to additional programs or technical assistance. And it also is a way that some of the basic things that in terms of grant applications, the redundancy, some of the names, the address, that kind of stuff gets eliminated and reduced because it's really through one portal. And I think the biggest benefit for this is that the state agencies that have some funding for community and economic development get to understand the community's needs a lot better and their priorities. And it is a way to, kind of advance community initiatives. The various grant programs that are covered, and there's 12 of them this year, are the MassWorks program, Urban Agenda, Housing Choice, Massachusetts Downtown Initiative, a Community Planning Grants Program, Rural Development Fund, Brownfields, Site Readiness, Underutilized Properties, and Collaborative Workspace Program, Real Estate Services, and Commonwealth Places. Now I know that can seem to sound, kind of overpowering if you were trying to, sort out those various grants. But the way that this program is intended to work is that there are various programs that deal with community capacity building. So some very basic services, technical services that you can get to work directly with the community. There are some planning and zoning grants programs to do things like comprehensive planning, master planning, and also some specific planning, economic development planning. And then there are grants that deal with site preparation, and also then moving into buildings and horizontal construction. So it's really geared towards the development continuum. The process is, and the reason that I'm bringing it forward tonight is we're just really starting the process for this grant cycle. And it's a two-stage application process, in that there's what a community does was file an expression of interest about some item that they want to work on, whether it be a planning effort or they have a underutilized site that they have the need for some housing development. And this expression of interest is really intended as a somewhat of a simplified approach to bring to the attention of the various state agencies the needs or the desires of that community. And then the state agency folks will take that that expression of interest and basically do triage on it and see what grant program it would fit in the best, or maybe there's another grant program in the state that it would be best served by. So they really are kind of a gatekeeper as to what grant would be the most appropriate. And then the full application opens up later in January, a fairly long application process through June, then the review and evaluation over the rest of the year, and then late fall there'll be awards made, and then the contracting would be by the end of the year. So I'm going to quickly just go through some of the programs that are the most appropriate for our communities, and I don't think that this one here, the MassWorks program, will be a surprise to anybody. This is for funding for capital projects, and it really is for improvements to land and infrastructure. There are a number of water and sewer projects that have been funded by this. There have been mixed-use developments that have been funded by this across the state. And this, while it says the uses can be for pre-development and direct construction, most of the successful applications are those that are fairly far along and can show that they're somewhat shovel-ready. The programmatic priorities for last year were housing development. This is still part of the current administration's effort on housing. And then also Gateway Cities get priority consideration for the MassWorks programs as well. I think the program the element of the MassWorks that most of our communities are familiar with is the STRAP program, which is a small town road program. These are for grants up to $1 million to fix road projects. And there have been a number of them that have been awarded recently. I think Otis was one that just received one this last round, as well as Great Barrington received a small one, and Hancock also received a relatively small grant. The program that I think is the most applicable to our group of planners and folks interested in planning is this community planning grant program. And this provides funds. This is a grant program to a community that provides funds for technical assistance for a wide range of community planning projects. And municipalities are eligible, as well as redevelopment authorities, as well as regional planning agencies. Some examples are master plans, housing production plans, zoning revisions, downtown plans, parking management plans, those type of activities. This is, I think, a pretty good program. The maximum award is going to be $75,000 this year, with this schedule, the work to start in the fall and needing to be completed in 2024. The various criterias are outlined here and in the grant solicitation itself. But Windsor was successful in this last go-around for some funding for a master plan. The other program that I want to highlight is this Rural and Small Town Grants Program. This is another, I think, applicable program for our communities, in that it really deals with infrastructure and community planning. And this is only open to towns with populations of less than 7,000 people or a density of less than 500 people per square mile. And this can be used for both capital projects, such as construction or equipment, or various planning projects as well. These awards are, range from $25,000 to $400,000. Larger awards, of course, being for the capital projects. And this is on the same schedule that the community planning grant program is. These other programs I'm going to run through very quickly, because I'm not sure that they're going to be entirely applicable to a lot of our communities, but I did want to make folks aware of them as potential. So the Urban Agenda program is one of the few that provides funding for operating support for community-based economic development projects. And although all municipalities are eligible, their priorities are more for the urban communities with a lower medium household income. But these can fund community-based programs such as commercial kitchens or community-based training programs and those types of items. Another program that is applicable as well is the site preparation and pre-development activities for municipalities and other public entities, and as well as a nonprofit. But this is trying to deal with getting sites ready for development or redevelopment, and things like site master planning, permitting, engineering, design studies, and even trying to get a site ready if there needs to be an existing facility on that needs to be demolished or the property to be acquired. The underutilized property programs is intended to improve blight, abandoned, vacant, or underutilized properties. And municipalities are also eligible, but this is excuse me, for properties that have been not in great shape, and can use some money for both stabilization, in terms of improvements that way, and improving code compliance, those types of items, but also doing some feasibility studies for pre-development to get that site back into a more productive use. I think that would be one that this program, I think there are a number of properties across the county that could benefit from this program. And then some other ones are related to the providing a provision of technical assistance. Mass Development is a sister agency to some of the state agencies. It's our state land bank agency, and they have a program where they'll provide technical assistance to municipalities on very site-specific problems that a community might have, or district-wide or region-wide economic development challenges. They have a focus on this year on public surplus property reuse. So if you should be having a property that you don't know what you're going to do with, this might be a good program. And also, not so much for us, things like a district improvement financing or a business improvement district. So that's a quick run through on this, this portal. I do think it's a good way for a community to get engaged with, various state officials in terms of, community planning and development. And so I think that the way it could work is a community, develops a master plan, and that master plan identifies a need. Let's say it's for a senior housing project or a housing project. And there's a site that they could use to work on that. So one year they could apply for a master plan. The next year they could apply for, some site work or site pre-development work, and possibly later they could apply to get funding from MassWorks to actually build it. So that whole development continuum is something that could be done. So with that, I don't know. I know some communities have received grants. I don't know if they want to chime in on that or have not received grants. Any comments on that? With that, I'll be quiet for a few minutes.
This is Doug McNally from Windsor, and thank you, Tom, because you tipped us off to this early on. We went through the process and got a grant. The little town of Windsor never had a master plan, and we are working with a planner from BRPC with the funding we got to do a master plan. But I think the thing that I want to comment on is they tell you pretty explicitly that access to all the downstream grants is facilitated by you getting in the process. Once you're in, setting it up is a little clunky. I have to say that the website's a little clunky when you first go in, but once you're in, you're in. And for us, for instance, as Tom just said, we're going to be doing a master plan. Once that's in, we can reference that, and they have all of that stuff. So when you go to the other aspects of the funding things, you get brownie points for it. You get the benefit points that you are already in the one-stop process. So I think it's kind of like the community compact. If you didn't do a community compact and you're applying for grants, you don't get those extra points. This is another one where that's going to happen.
Anyone else who would like to contribute to this discussion?
From Egremont, this is Mary McGurn. Thank you, Tom. Very helpful. Egremont is entering the portal for the first time. They did not do that last year. One of the things we noted is the expression of interest. If by February 4th, you can take advantage of the, let's say, using the expression of interest, you can put in for 5 projects. If you miss the February 4th, and you have until March, you can only put in 2. Currently, Egremont is working to try to put in at least 3, possibly 5, and they vary across the different, I like to call it pails or buckets. Clearly, zoning and planning is one. We also are a community that is developing its first affordable housing. And so there are many aspects of that the portal and the grant programs could assist us with. So a lot of what we will probably put in as expression of interest will be to help us move along that continuum to actual construction of affordable housing in Egremont. So we're thrilled and excited with the possibilities. If other towns have more information to share that have been through the portal in the first year, I would certainly like to hear it.
This is Doug again. One thing is the advantage of putting an expression of interest is they will give you feedback on your application, which is very beneficial. They'll give you some guidance, before the deadline when you actually make your application, and that was helpful to me.
Thank you.
Don, if I can add just a little bit more, Renee Wood from Sheffield. We went through this last year, and I agree with Doug, the portal can be a little clunky to get used to, but once you're in, they send you lots of messages. You can update it at any time. You can just keep working on your project until it's actually due. You just got to get used to the portal. We did 5 expressions of interest, and they varied all over the place. And I found their help to be really significant. It was the first time that we had a chance to actually speak with grant managers and with someone who could kind of say, you're a little weak on this, this looks strong, you need to improve. This section, I think they had over 200 expressions of interest to review. Last year, it'll probably be more this year, but I really felt they paid attention, and I thought the insight that they gave us helped us narrow it down to what we were going to apply for. We went for heavy equipment, and as everybody I think knows, only one community in Berkshire County got a grant under the rural development, and that was Williamstown. But I found it to be a worthwhile experience, and it takes a little time, but once that's invested, I think at least Sheffield got more out of it. I wish we'd gotten a grant, but we got more out of it than we've gotten before with similar grants. And then they gave feedback after the process when we were not awarded a grant. They spent time with us and went over where our grant application was weak, which was extremely helpful, and then answered all the questions that our town administrator and I had. So I think it's really a very worthwhile process.
Thank you, Renee. Are you going to do it again this year?
We're thinking, we have a lot of grants right now that we've got to get completed, and we don't have a grant writer, official grant writer, so we're going to have to measure it. But I did write down a few things that Tom went over, so I'm going to have to look at those. We may.
Thank you, Renee.
Just don't know.
Thanks.
If I could add, the state managers of that portal did hear that it was kind of clunky to work through it, and they have promised to make some improvements. I haven't actually worked in it directly this year, so I don't know, but we're hopeful that they can make it a little less clunky.
This is Doug. I want to throw something in also. Again, too much airtime, but one of the nice things about this is that they limit the amount of verbiage you can put in and stuff, the number of, so to the point of, that Renee made about not having a grant writer, Windsor doesn't have a grant writer, but I found that succinct requirements of stuff means that if you answer, they force you to answer the questions, which is the first thing grant writing training tell you to do, and they limit the amount of BS you can throw in there. So it really kind of levels the playing field. If you know what you're asking for and you answer the question, you can do as well as a professional grant writer. It's nice that way.
They limit your characters, I think. I think it's characters, not words. And so you really got to be concise, and that forces all of us to really get down to the basics.
Can I ask a question through the chair? Let's see, I'm trying to get my head around it. So I took a picture of the presentation and saw that there's several programs available. When you start looking at this and you work, and I understood Renee said she worked with her town administrator, how do you reach out to the community, or what is the beginning point of focusing in on the areas of need? Is that handled typically by the town administrator through the committee chairs and directors? You're grinning.
I think you have a much more inclusive process than we do. Your town administrator knows what's needed. There's excellent, if they're still there, excellent presentations on each of these grants on the one-stop community one-stop page. There were two sections, webinars they held last year. I'm sure they're still there. If you just read what the grants are for, and I think talk with your town administrator, we don't go through everybody decide what they want us to ask for. We focus on what we think we can get, and our town administrator knows best, given her overview of the entire operation, what those should be.
Okay, thanks, Renee.
Again,
so Renee just made a good point about the webinars. There will be more webinars this year for folks to look at. They haven't been posted yet, which is a little disappointing, but they are promised. And I sat through some of those last year, and they did seem to be useful as a starting point.
Tom, could I ask, when did this program first come online?
Last year.
Was it toward the end of the year?
No, it was. There was a cycle in the very beginning part of 2021.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Tom, since it's been on for a year, what's the impact on the BRPC in regards to, I think at BRPC, we support the communities, we go after grants, we help with plans, things like that. So has it been a negative effect to the BRPC or a positive effect?
Well, I think it's a positive. I mean, it has been a positive effect. I think what's good for the communities is good for BRPC, and specifically, I mean, we're working. Our staff are working with Windsor, so that's another contract that we have, a subcontract with Windsor on that project.
So the community will receive the funding, then they can reach out to BRPC for support?
Yes, if they get a grant, if they get grant funded. Some of these programs are for direct technical assistance by the state, and those, of course, there's no money that's being transferred.
For Windsor, John, for Windsor, our grant was for $32,000, $2,000 for town expenses and $30,000 for the hire a planner from BRPC.
Great. It's good to hear that we're working together on that. That's good. Any other inputs, discussion on this? Okay. All right, thank you, everyone. The next topic, Tom, housing discussion.
Yes, thanks, John. This is going to be me leading it off again, and hopefully it'll be relatively short and succinct, because I think we want to, move into the discussion element pretty quickly. But for several meetings, we've been talking about housing, I think maybe almost a year and a half or maybe 2 years ago, we had an open discussion amongst the commission about various housing issues and problems in Berkshire County. And since then, we've worked with One Berkshire and a group of housing practitioners to develop a regional housing strategy. And we're about to release that to the public. We're not, this is kind of like a preview of it. And I wanted to kind of just go over some of the highlights there. In your packet, there was a document, fairly large, a lot of words, a lot of numbers, a regional housing needs assessment. So that was a first starting point in terms of some of the quantifiable data that we worked on to develop this strategy. I do have another slideshow that I'm going to try to get up. Bear with me, please. All right, is that visible?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. So as I said, we have a regional housing strategy that we've been working on. We've been working in tandem with One Berkshire. As you may know, the Berkshire Blueprint was the economic development plan for Berkshire County that was developed by our main economic development entity in Berkshire County, One Berkshire. And as that plan was being finalized and released, there was more discussion with them on the economic impacts of our housing crisis. They were hearing from their businesses that it was really hard to attract employees to Berkshire County because it wasn't the right mix of housing. At the same time, we were hearing from our communities about the shortage of housing of all kinds, affordable housing in particular. And so we teamed up over this last almost 2 years because we were going to have our first meeting literally the day that the governor closed down the state due to COVID back in March of 2020. We were on a hiatus until the fall of that year, and then we started up with this group of housing practitioners. And so we assembled some of the key folks in the county that would have an interest in housing. We had, I'm not going to go through all the names, but we had bankers, we had planners, we had realtors, we had nonprofit developers, we had municipal officials. It was a good group of people who helped work on this. And we devised the strategy into highlighting some of the key issues that were identified both through the data as well as through the knowledge of these practitioners. And really the key item was that there was a shortage of units of all types of housing in Berkshire County. There's a shortage of mid-priced housing options, both rental and home ownership. There's a severe scarcity of affordable housing. There are few options for seniors to downsize, and that there just haven't been very many units built over the recent years. So that is one of the key items that came out of this. Another key item that was a little bit surprising to me was that from our group, that there was a lot of resistance to some of the housing development that was being proposed or was being developed. It wasn't really a welcoming framework for housing development in the county. There were frequently neighborhood opposition to various developments that were going through. There was also affordable housing projects in particular were stigmatized as being, Section 8 or public housing. And even we heard that there were some racial and ethnic undertones to all of that. The support for housing at the local level was not very strong. There was limited advocacy to counteract the opponents. And the state programs that are out there for housing are really not geared for the realities of Berkshire County. They're often very large, require large capitalization, require a long lead time, just don't seem to work. Another one of the themes that came out of this, or the issues, is that the municipalities, while they are working to advance these, really have some limited capacity to, focus on housing. If there are planners in communities, except for Pittsfield, which has a good planning staff, other communities are very limited in that way, or don't even have planners working on this. And then the framework, the regulatory framework for housing doesn't seem to be very housing development friendly, and it doesn't have a lot of options for different types of development projects or different densities. And to compound that, many of our core communities have limited or outdated or inadequate public facilities, and our rural communities don't have any at all to speak of. Another issue that came up was that developers, we didn't have a strong developer infrastructure backbone in Berkshire County. The developers that are out there are frequently small, not very well capitalized. They had challenges finding the appropriate development financing, and there was a shortage of skilled trade workers. I think everybody can react to that, trying to get some work done around your house. And it was really the more lucrative to work on large second homes than it was to do other types of development projects. And then the issue of housing insecurity. There was an increasing issue of homelessness, and homelessness being stigmatized more and more. And I think that we identified that homelessness is a county-wide issue. It seems that, that Pittsfield is the location that has to deal with homelessness, but that shouldn't be the case. That that all communities need to get engaged in the homelessness issue, and this has only been made worse with the impact of COVID-19, and the unemployment situation, the evictions, and even the reduced income to landlords, which is going to really contribute to further disinvestment in the properties. And our housing stock in Berkshire County is old. Much of it built, before 1940. Older housing stocks requires an investment to maintain and upgrade. It's energy efficient. There are areas that just aren't very well maintained. And then there's the code compliance with the 30% rule, which means that if you are doing improvements that are 30% of the assessed value, you have to bring the entire house up to code, which further increases the cost to doing any type of improvements and is a disincentive to doing that. So what we came up with is that, in fact, we are in a crisis in Berkshire County, a housing crisis. I don't think that's a surprise to this group. We've been talking about it for several meetings. It has had some impacts. It's affecting economic growth. It's affecting the ability to attract new people, particularly younger people, to the region. It is impacting personal health and well-being. There's a lot of research and data and evidence about the social determinants of health. And it's leading, I think, to the bigger issue of community impacts, that it's becoming harder and harder for our communities to maintain a robust mix of professions and people type that folks can't really afford to live in a lot of the communities that provide some of the services. I don't know if that's the type of community that we all want, but I think we're heading in that direction if we don't, take some action on the housing crisis. So what could be those actions? I think that we are the first item that we thought was we needed some type of a educational campaign about the problems here, and we needed some marketing material to make the general public aware of all these issues, and try to get some kind of a level understanding of the severity of the problems. We thought about doing that with an annual summit, and also trying to develop a network of folks in communities that can support housing development. I think that it's going to be key that when a housing related issue comes up, that there be people in the community to support that rather than just oppose it. We recognize that we need to get employers more engaged as in part of the solution to the housing problem. So we want to do an employee survey and get better understanding of who's doing what in the communities in terms of what are they using for tools right now, financing, and those types of things. And our practitioners group that we set up, we want to turn that into a regional housing task force that would meet on a regular basis. In terms of another of the themes and strategies that came out was really to proactively build a supporting environment for housing development and provide municipalities with support, whether it be direct assistance or providing them the information and the tools to kind of focus more on housing issues, employer advocacy, different programs, training programs for the building trades, making sure that those are instituted and valued, local rental inspection programs. A regional housing rehab program is something that is desperately needed in Berkshire County to deal with some of the older housing stock. The Attorney General's Abandoned Housing Initiative is another important program that can be put into place. And also revitalizing the homelessness plan that was done about a decade ago. It was a very terrific approach to deal with homelessness in Berkshire County that was developed with a wide range of stakeholders. But that never got implemented for one reason or another, and it seems important to kind of revitalize that and bring that forward. Use programs like the Bridges Out of Poverty program that's being used in Pittsfield, and improve financial literacy. And this is one of the comments that we heard. It's one thing to provide programs for folks of lower incomes, but it's also important that they know how to manage their finances to deal with that. I think the other area that we want to attack, and one of the reasons for this strategy, was to provide a vehicle for our legislative delegation about some advocacy. We need to make sure that there are additional state and federal resources that are appropriate to our rural area. A lot of these programs, they have 100 units is something that would be competitive, and we haven't had a housing development project in Berkshire County not nearly approaching that level. I think if we had a 10-unit development, that's a big development project. And then the 30% rule on in housing improvements, that's an important one to revisit, especially for lower valued properties, like is what we typically have here in the Berkshires. So if you have your house is valued at $100,000 and you want to try to put in a new bathroom might cost you $30,000, and therefore you might need to bring your entire house up to code. Now, if that house was in the eastern part of the state where property values are much higher, that wouldn't be in play. So the lower valued houses is where that comes into play more. And as I've been saying, these different programs that we have, we need to make sure that they work for rural areas. Some of the immediate actions that were identified was that in other sectors across the county, there did seem to be a unified group of folks that are working together. I mean, the environmental agencies are working with the Berkshire Natural Resources Councils as a lead, and other groups seem to be focused. But the housing community in Berkshire County didn't have that kind of tight-knit collaboration. And so what we thought was important is that there be a lead entity or entities that help to advance this agenda. And so One Berkshire, BRPC, and Berkshire Housing Development Corporation are going to kind of tag team up in leading the implementation of this strategic plan. I think that's going to be a good partnership. One Berkshire can work with the business community. We can work with the municipalities closer, and Berkshire Housing, who has housing development capacity and capability, can work with the development sector. Another immediate action and somewhat of a critique of our effort was that we didn't get very broad representation from a wide range of groups throughout the county. And so we're having a desire to increase the involvement of those groups. And we have secured a grant from CHAPA, which is the major housing entity in Massachusetts, doing housing advocacy, to do a municipal engagement initiative to help us build a strong coalition. This work is going to start in a few weeks, and so I ask you all to stay tuned for some announcements coming out of that. And hopefully you can be a part of that coalition or provide some input to it. And again, I talked, we need better data about what's happening, and research other housing models. What's worked in rural communities? What can we try to steal from those other areas for Berkshire County? And now I'm going to turn it over to Chris Brown from my staff, who's been doing some research about some of the numbers. So Chris, take it away.
Yeah, hi everyone. Really, I just ran a few numbers over the past few days. Hopefully that helped to illustrate Tom's point, or a variety of points about the housing issues in Berkshire, but also to put kind of a case study face on who it is that isn't being served by the current housing. So some numbers here, and these are all for teachers. These are entry-level teacher salaries. These are actual numbers from, I believe, 2018 was the most recent data. So in the city of Pittsfield, in the school district of Pittsfield, entry-level bachelor's is 40,000, master's about 45. You see the gross monthly incomes there. That 30% of GMI, that number is significant. 30% is typically defined as the housing burden threshold. Anyone that's paying 30% or more of their gross monthly income on housing costs is considered housing burden. So Pittsfield is, that's the data for Pittsfield. Tom, do I have? I do not.
You don't. I'm advancing. Just give me a nod.
Okay, we can go to the next one.
Yep, you were there.
Okay. So in Pittsfield, at those salary rates and at those income levels, there are 6 apartments throughout Pittsfield that would be below that 30% income level, or I'm sorry, 30% housing cost level for somebody who was an entry-level teacher with a bachelor's degree. However, there are 23 homes they could afford the average mortgage payment on. The issue there is saving up for a down payment in most cases if they haven't already. There are 19 total apartments available. That's just the full amount of apartments available throughout the city of Pittsfield, and 51 homes at any price point. I think North Adams is next. So North Adams, that is not a typo. The entry-level salary for teachers with a bachelor's degree is below $36,000. Master's is significantly higher percentage-wise, but still about 41. And there's the gross monthly incomes and the GMIs again, obviously a little bit lower with those salaries. The one thing I did want to note though, that asterisk for the master's degree column, the best case scenario. So in North Adams, given the salary level of entry-level teachers with master's degree and the median rent in North Adams, those individuals, this hypothetical individual in this case, would be using 24% of their gross income on their housing costs, which comparatively, all the incomes for these teachers and all the median rents, that would be the smallest amount. So at 24%, that would leave them with a little bit of income left over to save for a down payment if that was something they were planning to do. We can look at that a little bit later on. And then there's the Berkshire Hills. Oh, I'm sorry. So throughout North Adams, for the teachers on these salaries, there are 3 apartments they could afford in the entire city that wouldn't cost burden them. 12 affordable homes. Those 3 apartments in North Adams also happen to be the only apartments currently available in North Adams at any price point. And there are 15 homes available, 3 of which aren't on the affordable homes list. And then Berkshire Hills School District. The numbers are a little higher here. I think most people would assume they would be. It's still not very high for teacher salaries. The GMIs are a little bit higher, but the housing availability throughout Berkshire Hills is quite a bit worse than it was in Pittsfield and North Adams. See that on the next slide. So Great Barrington has no apartments that are affordable to entry-level teachers within it, and only 4 apartments all told. No homes that would be affordable at those income levels, but 36 homes total. Stockbridge, also no affordable apartments, only 3 total apartments in all of Stockbridge, no affordable homes, 6 total homes. West Stockbridge, no apartments at all, no affordable homes, and 5 homes for sale. And then to go, oh, I'm sorry. And to illustrate Tom's point about the number of units that have been constructed in Berkshire County, this goes back, 80 years, and you can see that it's about 20% of where we used to be. And this really tracks nationally. This curve shows up in state after state, and it shows up at the national level as well. There just aren't a lot of new housing units being put online. Most units, this graph doesn't go before 1940 because prior to 1940, it's all lumped together. That's just too noisy. But most of the units throughout the county that are existing were existing pre-war, and we've just been building fewer and fewer ever since. And then to go back to that North Adams example on the last slide. So this is the best case scenario for our teachers from these case studies. So this person would be a teacher who got a master's degree and got a job in the North Adams School District. If they were making the median salary at that, and they're paying the median rent, that would be 24% of their rent. They'd have 6% of their housing cost budget left to save. So say they could afford a $150,000 house, which is about what they could afford at that price point, given their income level and the mortgage payments. If they got the $15,000 down payment assistance for mass housing, which is available to anyone making 100% of the AMI, they would still need to put down $5,000 to get that mortgage low enough for monthly payment, which would take them over 2 years to save. So even for people that can access down payment assistance, there's still a pretty big lift trying to save money. And then in Berkshire's, the AMI is just below $60,000. So mass housing only gives you down payment assistance up to 100% of AMI unless you live in one of the more metropolitan areas. Then I believe it goes up to 135. So as soon as you cross the $60,000 threshold, which a lot of entry-level positions in some of the white-collar industries start out at, you are cut off. It's similar to the Medicare donut hole. There's a housing donut hole where you make too much to avail yourself of a lot of the government programs, but you don't make enough to live comfortably or just affordably in the town where you work and save for a home at the same time. So you're sort of removed from the housing continuum, and you're likely to become a full-time renter. Yeah, so that was just some data to back up some of the points from the regional housing strategy, and hopefully try to put a finer point on the picture of who it is that we're trying to create more housing availability for throughout the county.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And with that, what I'd like to try to do is enter into some discussion with you all as we try to implement this strategy and really think, what is the single most important thing that we could do as a community or as a region, and how can we build a coalition to kind of keep supporting this? I'm going to stop sharing so we can kind of check in with each other. And John, I see that Doug has his hand raised.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know me well, I was a public school principal in the city of Pittsfield for 31 years, and then worked at MCLA for another decade beyond that. And the data shared here, I want to make the point that this is not new. I had trouble recruiting teachers before 2000 because of this problem. It's been here for a long time. To the question that Tom just raised, I think that we need to target a general information program for the general public that has two prongs. Number one is there's a lot of concern about the drop in population. And part of the reason for the drop in population is it's not affordable to live here. And the second is the employers not being able to do recruitment. I'm on the Berkshire Workforce Board also, and it's been a perennial problem for the Workforce Board. Employers cannot get entry-level employees because they can't live in the Berkshires. They can't afford to live in the Berkshires. One of the unique things about the Berkshires that I think we need to address is that if we can't get the smaller communities involved in this, we can't solve the problem. Pittsfield and North Adams can't solve this problem. Great Barrington can't solve the problem. And the problem, I represent Windsor. I think we in Windsor have to find a way to repurpose failing houses and stuff like that, and find a way to make us part of the solution. We can't say, yeah, Pittsfield, you have all the affordable housing and we will stay up here in our 5 acres, single homes that cost, $300,000 to $500,000 and you got to solve the problem. So I think enough said, but the small towns have to weigh in.
Tom, I noticed in the original listing, and maybe I'm missing something, but I did not see anyone on that listing of the members of representatives from the major employers in the area, Berkshire Health Center, Raytheon, and so forth. It all seem to be town representatives and what I'll call innies as opposed to what might be outies relative to that. Any reason for that, whether or not no one was included?
Well, One Berkshire was representing those interests. I mean, they had discussions with their board, so that's how that interest was a part of it, Fred. They were really the drivers of it.
And the major major employers are directly involved.
The larger ones
go through One Berkshire.
The larger ones, yes. I mean, I don't know if they all are, but okay. Like General Dynamics clearly is engaged with One Berkshire. Berkshire Health Systems, I don't know that for sure. But I mean, again, so one of our strategies was to work closer with the employers. We recognize that that's a need that we need to kind of improve on. John, I see Christine has her hand up.
Christine.
Thank you. As you probably know, at least some of you, Stockbridge tried very hard to adopt a open space residential design bylaw. and we had a lot of support. But our voices were lost because of this feeling that we do not want change. And this is going to be awful. We're going to have change. Well, we are having change, but people do not want to recognize that, and they seem to favor these very expensive homes. I think what we need are definitely credible resources that are able to be easily shared in the public domain so that these voices can be balanced by information that is just important for people to have. And that was our problem. The Voices of Opposition started a newsletter that comes out every 2 weeks and just was not factual. And we did not have a way of being able to get the facts in the hands of people. So I don't know what the answer is, but I think for some small towns, that kind of information, when you don't have a full-time planner on staff who understands the town dynamics, could be really important.
So Christine, I'd like to, I mean, have you thought about what type of information would be useful? I mean, because we're, again, as I mentioned, you know, we've, and I didn't actually mention this, but we do have some resources to prepare some of this material. Representative Paul Mark did put in an earmark in this last budget cycle for funds for us, One Berkshire, and Berkshire Housing Development Corporation to focus in on the housing. And that's why I'm very interested in this discussion. If there are some very specific things that you would like us to focus on, whether it's, you know, the particular information that you need or whatever, that's, and I'm not putting the onus on you, Christine, but if you have some thoughts, I'd love to hear those.
I think getting information, even in the Berkshire Eagle and the Edge, is going to be important because a lot of people read that. And this group in our town use those two publications also to promote their point of view. And I think, I know for my problem was that I couldn't spend enough time to write good enough responses when they had all this ink that came out every 2 weeks and would, if we could not reply to their publication, they limited the replies to 250 words or 400 words, and you could only submit one reply a month. So, and if you did reply, there was usually comments afterwards which tried to discredit what you were saying. So it was a very difficult situation to be in. And we need to go back to the very beginning, I think, and talk about these figures that you showed tonight. The Berkshire Hills School District, that's Stockbridge. And we really need people to understand that we cannot have people who we need in our community because we're unwilling to look at some alternatives. And maybe natural resource preservation wasn't the answer, but we have a 300-acre parcel that was proposed for development. The town reacted in such a way that the development was pulled back. And the last I heard, the person who wanted to develop it doesn't even want to work with Stockbridge in the future. So I think we've really got to change the discussion and start to bring people to a point where they can say yes.
All right, thank you.
Hey,
John,
Tom, I can't see whose hands are up, so could you take care of that for me?
Yeah, Renee, I think your hand was up next.
Thank you. This is a really complex problem, so there's so many facets to it, and it varies by community. But one thing I have been thinking about, actually, there's two comments I want to make. I think every campaign that I have seen over the years, whether it was Black Llama Milk or a mink or whether it is something else, they put a face. So instead of those people, these people, you can see that here is so-and-so who is a teacher in this school, who's been a member of our community for X number of years. And this is the person who is looking for this housing. I think the longer we continue to talk about faceless people, I think Chris did an excellent job. I was shocked by what he presented, but it really brought it home. I think the longer we talk about faceless people, the longer this conversation is going to go on. We need to have these people be our neighbors. And if they're us, they need to be us. So we've got to put some faces on this, families. We just have to we have to make this human rather than just words. The second thing, I think that, and we're just starting this process with a housing production plan with Chris's help. I think this is just so incredibly overwhelming. And if you get it to the point that you can start to set aside money and you actually have a plan, who is it that's going to do it? So I think we need to build up the nonprofit, non-town specific development corporations. I can't think of the one in Great Barrington that has done such an incredible job in that town of developing housing. But I think the more those corporations would incorporate other towns, such as Sheffield, so that when we get to the point where we are reasonably well to go, we don't have to then face, well, now how do we actually do it? Because if you don't have an implementation plan, I would argue that you don't have a plan. So that would be my second request, is that we really start strengthening those nonprofit groups who know how to do this well, so that we don't have to try and reinvent the wheel.
Renee, to your first point, thank you. But to your first point, Chris has volunteered almost to be the face of the the affordable housing.
No,
if you don't mind,
no,
Chris.
It's not the team; it's the people who are going to.
Let me. He's affected.
Okay, all right.
Because he lives in New York right now, and he's trying to move to Berkshire County. Chris, I'll let you speak if you want.
Yeah, I'm not quite in the housing donut holes as far as being able to access state programs and federal programs and things like that. But it's tricky. The only places I can currently afford that are available, the availability to me is more the issue than the affordability. There just aren't enough housing units at any price point. I think it's important to focus on availability of housing rather than affordability. But there are a few places in North Adams that I can afford, and I think 2 or 3 in Pittsfield, and that's it. And I don't make significantly more than what those entry-level teacher salaries were, but percentage-wise, quite a bit more. But there's just not a lot out there. There aren't a lot of options. There were 2 things that I wanted to throw out, but I don't want to jump in front of the people that have their hands up. But yeah, I am definitely someone who is affected by the housing crunch, and this will not be the first place I've been priced out of in the past 2 years. But it's just kind of sweeping the nation.
Amanda, I think your hand was up next.
Yeah, this is a really interesting discussion, and I something I'm noting is there's a sort of a dynamic and different impacts of this problem between North County and South County, because very validly, no, it's not fair that Pittsfield and North Adams have to shoulder all the burdens of strategizing, making housing available and affordable housing and so on. And the thing is that as Christine was saying, South County, I'm going to go out on a limb here, and South County, I've experienced as having a very severe NIMBY problem. And so I think specifically, yeah, we do need to put a human face on the problems of affordable housing and attracting people to the area. And I've lived in Stockbridge and living in Tyringham. You do run into this attitude of, well, my kids go to Brearley. I don't care about the local public schools. And and I'm not saying it's across the board, mercifully. I think that's not a great number of people, but they have very loud voices. And yeah, I coming from a very, very small community in South County, I'm very excited to make linkages and coalition and common calls with others here from small communities and large communities, but who are facing these issues, because it's felt very atomized.
Okay, well, that's good. I mean, I hope we can get this coalition, going, and you're certainly welcome to be a part of it. Barb, I think you were next.
Yeah, two things. One is when Christine was talking about the opposition to a project in her community. I think I can't remember which town she was calling about, but it was interesting that she was saying that the written print newsletter was what was the concern, and it was hard to fight that. One of the things I've seen that become very dynamic today is social media and the impact social media has on immediate information. And one of the things I found to be quite effective is if you can get a Facebook page up that has a good professional look to it, and you have a administrator or two that have the ability to put content in that separates the difference between fact and fiction, it might go on deaf ears because a lot of people don't care about facts these days. So, but at least it'll give you, the ability to say, this information was sourced by this, and this is the actual fact. And it'll give you a little bit more of an advantage over the print, because print becomes somewhat obsolete, right after the ink dries. I think it would be a nice avenue. The other comment I was going to make about this whole issue of housing crisis, and it's unfortunate that your rural communities have the land space but not the utilities. Well, one thing I witnessed in the town I'm from, Lanesboro, years ago, is the powers to be had the opportunity to bring the utilities in and didn't want the public utilities, because they knew they're in their minds, and this is a generation before mine, is that once you bring sewer and water up, that means you bring housing, and they equated it to more of a burden on the school district. So therefore, instead of the class sizes being maybe 15 to 18 kids per class, and then they equated that with more cost and more taxes. So it kind of like it's this vicious cycle, which sadly enough is a huge problem. I mean, you don't want to burden housing in Pittsfield and North Adams. You've got these communities that have massive land in order to do it, but some of the planners and some of the powers to be just don't want to see it.
Barb, do you think that attitude has changed over the last 10 or 15 years?
Well, the people that made the decision, only a few are left. It'd be interesting to have the conversation to find out, is this still, I mean, we have the opportunity, to bring sewer through both ends of the town. Up right now, I think we can come up from Route 7 and come up from Route 8. But I don't have a problem with asking that in the groups of people that I'm involved with all the time, just to get a sense. I think right now, and it is, I live every day in this crisis that you're talking about. That's what I do for a living, and it is horrific. I don't know. I don't know how companies are surviving, and it's sad. I sit on the rental housing board and work in the real estate industry, so you can only imagine the conversations. But it's just sad and scary that people can't, get affordable housing. Not through the fact that, even forget the affordability. Now we're at the level of availability.
Yeah.
And that's even worse.
Yeah, that's what we found. It's just there's a shortage of all kinds of units right now.
Yeah. But we could put, if capital was available, we have land masses, but like you were talking earlier, these developers have so much opportunity to build these mansions in South Berkshire County, and probably have less risk and make more money. So there's really no incentive. You have to have incentive to draw capital. So it's just a combination.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Sheila, I think you were next. You're muted.
Yep, I'm unmuted now. I just wanted to say a couple of things. I think the need for educating people as to what housing is involved. I think that when people hear very often affordable housing, they have a concept of huge apartment buildings with poor people in them. And I think in one of the sections you talked about models of housing. And I think it's important that if we're going to look to make more housing available, we have to give people opportunity to imagine what that can look like other than big apartment buildings. I think a lot of people feel like if affordable housing or even workforce housing comes to their community, it's going to change the nature of the community, and it frightens them. So I think giving models of what things can look like. I think Habitat for Humanity has done a lovely setup here in Pittsfield with the housing that they built just in my neighborhood. And I think that those kinds of models kind of take some of the fear out for people. And I think the idea that here we're getting this big infrastructure bill, maybe this is the opportunity for some of the more rural areas to have sewage and water systems. I know when we moved from New York City here, one of the things we were looking for was city sewer and water. We didn't want to be in a situation where we were dependent on wells and septic fields. So anyway, that's just my contribution.
No, I think that the suggestion of models is something that we really need. We need to see positive examples of where we can do it at a Berkshire scale, not some of the other major ones. Thank you. Sarah, I think you were up next.
One thing I haven't heard mentioned in this whole discussion is climate change and the implications for housing. And one of the things that I think people mistakenly think, because it used to be true, but isn't anymore, is that building energy efficient housing and net zero houses only costs a little bit more than building a house to code. And that extra money that's spent lowers the ongoing utility costs and the like for the occupant. And so that they come out ahead financially in the total scheme of their housing expenses. And I see a lot of old houses that need a lot of renovation when I drive along Route 7 and through Pittsfield. And those houses, we need to upgrade so that people can afford to live in them, not just paying the rent, but paying the utilities. And that needs to be part of the picture. And I think there's a big problem, and we need more housing. We don't make sure it's ready for what's coming down the pike. And climate change is coming down the pike like a approaching hurricane. It seems all the estimates are always too low, not for what's going to happen, not how bad it's going to be. And so as we do this housing, we should be thinking about those issues as well.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. So thank you. Chris, you were up next, it looks like.
Oh yeah, I just want to touch on a couple of things that people have said. First, Barb became my favorite person because that's the first time that someone said housing availability instead of housing affordability. We're trying to make that happen. One of the things I did want to hit on though was climate change. This is kind of a longer timeline view, but I think it's something certainly that as a regional planning commission it should be taken into account. The likelihood is that the biggest effect that climate change is going to have on housing in Berkshire County is a lot of people are going to move away from the coastline. So there's already been a crush of people that have moved from New York City and Boston just because of housing affordability, and now there will likely be at some point in the next few decades another successive wave of people, or maybe successive waves, plural, of people who are escaping rising sea levels. So that's something that the county will likely have to absorb at some point. Yeah, I just really wanted to reiterate I think one of the things that gets people in neighborhoods and in communities really up in arms against housing projects and housing regulation changes, procedural changes, it's that term affordable. And you're really just talking about housing. If you just stop saying affordable, you're still talking about the same thing, but you're taking away kind of that word that sets people's teeth on edge. You know, it doesn't need to be affordable. There's no real reason to look at housing from the standpoint of who that end user is going to be. It should just be the housing options that are available to the people that live in the community. One of the biggest things that we hear is, especially from seniors, a lot of people want to age in place in their community, but not necessarily in their home. So they've got a 2,400 square foot home. Maybe they're alone now, or maybe they just don't feel like taking care of a house that big anymore, but they don't want to leave. So what options are there for them locally? And a lot of times there are no options. But the same kind of housing unit that could fulfill that need is a housing unit that could fulfill the need of somebody making, $50,000 a year who just got out of college. Like that fills both needs without being specifically catered towards either one. It's just housing. I think it's kind of important to carry that through. Nope, I had another one, but somebody got to it. That was all.
All right, thanks, Chris. Rob. Robert, yeah.
Well, on this whole issue of availability and affordability, one of the things that I do on a regular basis, and I'm from a very small town, Beckett, 50 square miles, but only 1,900 roughly residents. So when we get into the area of availability and affordability, in the past year, I noticed a trend that was taking place, and it's called the COVID-19 premium. Anybody else familiar with that? All right, COVID-19 premium is that the houses were going for $200,000, all right, in prior years, are now in the $250,000 to $300,000 range, all right? Making it very, very difficult because people are just snapping up these homes. And another factor that's snapping up homes are short-term rentals, okay? I haven't heard anybody talk about short-term rentals, but you've got people coming out of the cities, buying up homes, and forget getting rents from local people month to month, okay? Just bring the kids in here, okay, especially into lake communities like we have in Beckett, and you can make 3 times the amount of money, and you don't have, you're taking away the housing stock for the people who actually need it. That's one of the things that's actually happening. The other thing is that the model that was mentioned earlier, okay, I'm a school teacher. I taught for over 38 years in the state of Massachusetts and 2 years in Indiana. I watched in Indiana in the late 70s. Actually, it wasn't in Indiana. It was in Louisville. All right, not Louisville. Well, it might have been Louisville. It was a small town just across the border, and they had a they had a tract of land and they sold it. The developer came in and he basically was going to put in affordable housing. Okay, the affordable housing was trailers. He built a trailer park, 1,600 trailers in 1 year. He collapsed the school system. Now, I understand why. Each one of those families that came in there had 2 kids, all right, at least. And they all went into the school system, and the school system didn't know what to do. So getting back to, you have to be careful about how you manage all of this housing. In the town of Beckett, we have more subdivisions than you can shake a stick at. Many of them go back, they predate when I moved into the town, which was in 1989. And those same developments are still there today. As a matter of fact, I watched one community sell lots just this past year. Now, these are vacant lots. They sold in 1989 for $45,000 a piece. This year, in the month of December, okay, because I do check the housing records every single week, 2 of them sold for $4,500. Does that make it affordable? I guess, okay, to somebody who wants to buy a vacant lot and build a house. So there are the housing stocks in the town of Beckett. We had a community like Sherwood Forest, all right. Sherwood Forest basically has a lot of housing that was built and was very substandard, and that 30% rule is going to be crucial. I really want to basically tear most of that housing down, all right. But we've got quarter-acre lots that people could build on, and and they could afford these things. But the other point that I wanted to make is that when you use that example of teachers making $40,000 or $45,000, well, first of all, your basic teacher coming in with a bachelor's degree is not going to be a teacher for more than 5 years. Okay, they have to get a master's degree. So let's use the master's degree, and then let's look at two income households. All right, most households, most teachers that I knew when I was in the field had 2 incomes. So it wasn't $40,000; it was $70,000, $80,000, or $90,000. Okay, I look at police departments. We're paying our police officers in the town of Beckett about $70,000 a year. All right, so let's not just use teachers. Okay, someone else mentioned the other employers in the area. Okay, and how much money they're making.
Yeah, Bob, we were just starting off on that.
No, I know, I understand.
Yeah.
I just want to bring in some of the thoughts that I have.
No, I think those are good points. And Doug, I think your hand was up again.
Just a point where we're talking about the schools. I know the previous speaker talked about districts being overwhelmed, but Bill Cameron is heading a task force for education in Berkshire County, looking at the imploding student enrollment in the county, and the fact that our districts are, within 10 years, going to be totally dysfunctional because of lack of enrollment. We don't have enough children to run our schools, and I think that's just an ancillary thing to the drop in population. My district, Central Berkshire School District, with Wacona High School, that when I moved here some years ago had a high school that was built for 1,000 students. Just by the state standards, was granted money to build a new school with a maximum population of 420, which is barely large enough to run a high school. In my opinion, too small to run a high school. And districts throughout the county are facing that. If we don't address this problem, families will not want to move to Berkshire County because we don't have an educational system that is vibrant.
All right, thanks, Doug. Mr. Chair, I'm looking at the clock. I see, I'm not sure if Amanda has her hand raised again. Okay, I guess one more last comment, please.
One more, yes.
Just very quickly, I wanted to push back a little bit on Chris's point about the terms availability and affordability, because Chris, your point is well taken, but say in Terringham, there are a fair number of properties available, but there are, you know, $1 to $3 million properties, and that's a sort of a basic supply and demand issue also. You know, a $1 to $3 million property is not going to help a teacher, a nurse, you know, police, you know. So it's like, what properties are available? You know, okay, we talk about workforce housing, but I think, you know, affordable and available are not actually interchangeable ideas. You know, that's all I wanted to say.
Well, Mr. Chair, if I might just wrap up a bit, I think this has been a very valuable conversation. I think you've reinforced some of the areas that we were going in, but also added some new ones. I mean, I think it is important to get more buy-in from the employers and more connection with them. Put a face on it. That's a good suggestion. Maybe a Facebook page, a good suggestion. Make sure we don't ignore climate change in this whole deal. And the models, you know, look for new models that will be appropriate in, you know, Berkshire County. Making sure that if we're using examples, we consider a lot of different factors like, you know, dual incomes and those types of things. So I think this has been very helpful. And again, looking forward to the next step. I think this idea that of a coalition forming in an annual summit of some kind would be something that we can kind of be heading towards. So I appreciate the conversation. Thank you.
As I do too, and you never know how the discussions will go, but this is like the second meeting in a row. We've had some great input. But for housing, because of the major impact this is having on all of our communities, I was wondering, Tom, if the next meeting we can continue the housing discussion, but move it forward to, you can come back and maybe give us some input on some of the notes you took in talking with other members of that committee, but also maybe some success stories, some things that have worked for some communities. Because this evening we've heard a lot of issues that the communities have, some of the problems that they've had. And we didn't even talk about Adams yet, but I'll wait till I'll hold that off. But if we could just continue the discussion going, and then get to the end where you provide your organization, your committee provides the suggestions moving forward, and we can also have some input and review of those too. So I want to keep this going. I think it's really big for Adams. And we're a community that wants to bring housing into our community. But I've been on the board for 11 years now and been working on this, and we don't have one new housing project. We have one that we have a developer signed on, but it's taken that long to get one developer and one project, at least for us. So what are your thoughts about that? Continue the discussion?
Yeah, I think that's what we've kind of agreed to as executive committee, and
right.
Our commission development committee is, you know, hard at work and trying to formulate the, you know, how we can go ahead with that. And success stories is a good next step.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention Renee and her subcommittee. Excellent choice of topics the last few meetings. So thank you, Renee. And just one last parting bit of information. The company I work for in Pittsfield, before the meeting, I went out to see the job postings. And in the last 3 days, there's been 22 new job postings put out there for engineer type in the, you know, background. So, you know, there's a lot of jobs that are available, as we all know, but that's just in the last 3 days. There's 22 new postings for very good jobs. But with, you know, bringing people into our county, the housing issue is going to probably impact many of these individuals looking for these positions. So, okay, let's wrap that up. And Tom, Executive Director's report.
Yeah, I'll run through this pretty quickly too. I think that it's pretty straightforward. You have been hearing about our office expansion. Well, the work has actually started. I wasn't in the office today. I don't know exactly what they're doing, but they've expanding into the other area, so that seems to be going along good. We have continued to kind of expand our public health program with 2 new hires. Good news on the DLTA fund, the District Local Technical Assistance. We did get our contract yesterday. We haven't gotten a notice to proceed yet, but we are getting a lot closer, quicker than I thought. So that would be good. The one item that I did want to make sure that everybody was aware of is that we do have a SurveyMonkey vehicle out there and open. If you have any particular Berkshire County questions that you might want to ask our candidates for state office, either the governor, lieutenant governor, or possibly the auditor, we're compiling a list of those questions and trying to get a broad of input as possible. So if you can get, if you have some burning question you'd like to bring forward, what we'll do is we'll take all that we gather and try to synthesize them together and prioritize, and then ship them off, and let's see what we get. Hopefully we can get some kind of a response from these folks, especially now that we have a new candidate who just announced today, a leading candidate, so the pundits say anyhow. And let's see what she has to say and her familiarity with Berkshire County. And then on the last item on my report was the passenger rail situation. Surface Transportation Board has been holding hearings. This has been in the newspaper with CSX desired acquisition of the Pan Am rail system. It looks like they are somewhat agreeing to some passenger rail service and trying to break through some of the roadblocks that they've been creating for a long time. I think we'll still have to see the details as they unfold, but we're much more optimistic now than we were a few weeks ago. Any questions? I'll be glad to respond to anything.
Well, where am I?
Okay.
I think, Mr. Chair, it looks like Mr. Ronzio has his hand up.
I just want to know if in fact we get rail service. Are there going to be plans to really reintroduce the stations that were basically abandoned years ago?
Well, the rail,
the town of Beckett, they just blew that one right out. Okay, it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, it depends on what route you're talking about. The Berkshire Flyer, which is what was in the paper for CSX, there's not going to be any new stations there. That's going to go to the Intermodal Center. And the east-west, the stations that have been proposed there are, again, the Intermodal Center in Pittsfield, but also they're exploring a station in Chester. But those are the only ones that we've been talked about in this region.
Thanks.
This is Doug, just jumping in. Sheila and I are on the BRTA board. One of the things that we really need to be ready to address is, okay, this train brings these people and it drops them in the middle of Pittsfield. How do they get out of the intermodal center?
Yeah, good point, Doug. And my staff is working on that with BRTA staff.
Anything else, Tom?
No, that's it from my end.
Okay, that completes the agenda for this evening. Thank you all for attending. Looking forward to the next meeting. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, everyone have a good evening. Thank you.
Yeah, good night, everyone.